Welcome back, everybody. So today we're going to be talking about a viewer question, which is about panel interviews when you are trying to get into industry and kind of how to tailor a talk towards an industry audience, which is a little bit different than what you would normally give in academia. So if you have any questions, I typically answer them in the comments section, or sometimes if there are these bigger, broader questions, I think can be addressed to more people, I will make videos about them. So if you have questions, make sure to drop them down in the comments, down below. Don't forget that nowadays, if you want to get YouTube videos out to people, you need to hit the thumbs up button. The more thumbs up we get, the more people that are going to view this. I hope that this is really useful information. I wish that I had this information when I was going through grad school or a postdoc or trying to transition to industry. These are things that I didn't quite have. So I hope you guys find this helpful. So let's just kind of dive into this. So in the 3-part video we had about transitioning into industry, I talked about the actual kind of interview process. And if you didn't watch those videos, I would go back and take a look at those if you're thinking about going into industry. However, what we didn't go in depth about is panel interviews. So what are panel interviews and how are they different than what you've probably had in academia? So I'm guessing in academia, a lot of the interview experience you had was with the PI itself. And you may have interviewed with some other grad students or postdocs in the lab, but generally, that's more just them talking to you, getting to know you more than really an interview. And when you interview in industry, it's a lot different. The interview questions are like real interview questions. So the way it works is once you submit your cover letter and your CV and you do the online application, you're gonna maybe get a call from someone at HR, which is gonna do like a basic screen just to make sure that you kind of fit actually what they're looking for. And you may not even get that. It may just go right to what's called the hiring manager. And the hiring manager, for lack of a better word, is going to be who's your boss if you were to get hired there, who's going to be your actual supervisor. And they're going to call you up and they're going to ask you interview questions and, get a feel for how you are. And what they're going to do is they're going to look for 2, maybe 3 people that they think are like the best fit for this position. Depending on the position, they may have 3 people. If it's not as big of a position, they may only have 2. And they're gonna try to take those few people and put them through what are panel interviews. That's your on-site interview. Nowadays it's done through Zoom, but when the pandemic is over, it'll go back to being literally on-site where you go and do these panel interviews. And the reason they call them panel interviews is because it's back-to-back interviews, and a lot of times it's with a panel of people. And so how do they work and who's gonna actually interview you? So depending on the level you're applying to is going to determine who are the people that interview you. So if you are a bachelor's or a master's, someone with a bachelor's or master's and you're coming in, you're going to be interviewed by a mixture of people with a bachelor's and master's and maybe some PhDs, scientists. Maybe, for example, I just hired some people that were associate level, so they have a bachelor's and master's, and they interviewed with mostly people that are at that level, to kind of judge better than I can how well they can maybe succeed, because they're the ones that are day in, day out doing that job. They interviewed with me, they interviewed with a sister position of mine, which is another PhD team lead, and then my supervisor, who's a director level position. When I interviewed in industry, it was no real associates except for the 2 people that I was going to inherently take over and manage them. So, they needed to make sure I was going to be a fit with them. But besides that, it was all scientists and up, and it was a lot of directors and a VP. And if you're, even higher up, like a director or VP, you probably wouldn't even be watching this video. But, in that case, it's obviously going to be much higher level people that are interviewing you. And the interviews can be 1-on-1, it could be 2-on-1, it could be 3-on-1. So there may be multiple people talking to at once, and maybe only one person talking to at once. And so kind of what are the general types of questions that you're gonna get? So again, it depends on the position you're going for. But if you're watching this, you probably are either somebody coming out with a master's or a PhD, and you're going to be landing some sort of a largely bench-based position, meaning you may have other roles within the company, but a lot of what you're going to be doing is going to be at the bench. And so kind of what are the questions that you're going to be asked? The first set of questions are going to be technique-based questions. So depending on the position that you're applying for, they may ask different types of questions. So let's say that you're going to a molecular-based position, which does a lot of PCR and ELISA and Western blot, your common, bench-based molecular assays. They may ask you things like, what software or equipment have you used for PCR before? Are you familiar with MSD for ELISA, or do you just run off-the-shelf ELISAs? Things like that, to get a feel for like what you can actually do. And then they may start to probe more. Okay, so you've used, this type of ELISA before. So how have you demonstrated that this ELISA works in, the way that you're expecting it to work? How do you know what's background noise? They start to kind of probe and see, as they peel back the layers, how far could they probe and how far can you continue answering these questions. They're going to ask some basic, I guess they're called behavioral questions, but it's more personality traits, soft skill things. So if you're going to be managing people, they may ask, how would you deal with conflict between two people on the team? They may ask things like, are you a detail-oriented person or a big picture person? Maybe they want someone that's really in the weeds and knows the details of everything that they're doing. Or maybe they're hiring you because they want somebody more big picture. They may ask, if we have this scenario come up a lot where we want to look for this particular kind of biomarker. So if you were to look for this kind of biomarker, how would you go about doing that? What strategies would you use, or what techniques would you use to do that? They may ask about how well you can handle cross-functional. So if you're in research and development, can you, interact with someone in program management? They're going to ask a lot of questions specific to their area. So it's kind of hard to know exactly the questions that they're going to ask, because the questions I'm going to ask is going to be different than if, another scientist in my company is hiring, because they're going to have a different need for an employee. But the things that you can look out for are definitely what your technique is, and techniques are, I should say, and kind of, how are you as a person? The other things that they're going to be asking are, if you're going into industry for the first time, why do you want to go into industry? They're going to be asking, if you're leaving industry, kind of, why are you leaving the company that you're currently at? They're going to ask questions about what makes you interested in this particular position, what makes you interested in this particular company. So certainly you need to have an idea of what the position is, because I've interviewed people who clearly didn't know. So do know that, do understand generally what the company does and what they're researching. It's a shock when you have these people that interview and they clearly have no clue what your company does. So you should have an idea of what that is. And this really won't apply for people with a bachelor's or a master's. This is more for individuals that have a PhD, but you will be asked to give some type of scientific seminar to a group of people that you would be closely working with. And you need to tailor that differently than how you would give a scientific talk in academia. So in academia, it's all about mechanism, right? That's kind of the basis of basic science, right? And trying to figure out the mechanism of how does nature work around us, right? Whether it's physiology, plant biology, whatever it is, like we're trying to figure out a mechanism. It's always what we're doing. So that's always the question, and always should be the question is, well, great, you show this data, but what's the mechanism, right? And then that's the large question. Finding a big observation is easy, working out the mechanism is the hard part. In industry, the mechanism isn't necessarily the biggest aspect. So I will use research that I presented as an example and kind of how I tailored it differently. So I presented on a project where we used a, kind of CRISPR-based screening method to look for new transcription factors of a gene we were interested in. And if I was giving this talk in academia, what I would have done was kind of given the background of like why we're interested in this gene. I would have, shown the data from this CRISPR screen, said this is the target, and then shown all the validation and worked out all of the mechanism. And then cool, this is like, what we wanted to learn. But when I actually gave my talk, it was geared a little bit differently. First of all, the people that I was giving the talk to were not subject experts in this area. So I had to paint with a broader stroke because, they wouldn't understand in all the weeds, where I was. And their interests are different. They want translational. In industry, it's all about translation. It's not about mechanism, it's about translation. So the way that you set it up is, this is the disease state. This is the disease that I am interested in. That's the first thing, is always establishing the disease that you are interested in. This is why I'm going to target this specific gene in this disease. You set up your big screen and explain what the screen is and what you hope to accomplish. And then you basically transition into, this is what I picked as my target and how I validated it, right? Target validation is super important in industry. And then from there, it's not so much working out the mechanism, although I did talk a little bit about mechanism. It was more, how could you apply this in a way that would be translatable? So if I were to start up my own biotech, this is what I would do to target this and like what I think I would be able to accomplish. And even if you weren't right about every little process that would happen, at least you demonstrate that you're thinking in those terms of like, how could I help a patient? All the companies want to be patient-centric. So you need to kind of paint yourself as that this is kind of the area that I'm interested in. This is the angle I'm coming at it at. Is it's not just about finding the mechanism, and that it is important and cool to do that, but really what I want is something translatable that's going to help a patient. And if I could help a patient, then I would be a good fit for your company. And that's kind of the way that you need to paint yourself when you apply for a job in industry. You got to keep that in mind when you interview. They want to know that you're a patient-centric person. So I hope that this answers that individual's question. I know that if you have other questions that, sometimes you don't want a whole video made about it, that's fine. Like, you can write them in the comment section. I could just answer it. But if you like this kind of thing, make sure to comment that, this is a question that I do have. Please make a video about it. And, if it's something that's broad enough that could help enough people, I'd really be happy to make videos about it. Because one thing I've learned is a lot of people have the same question, A lot of things that you guys are asking are things that I also wondered. My wife also wondered. Other colleagues I have also wondered. So you're not the only one that's wondering, some of these things. And it's good to get it off your chest and talk about it with you guys. So with that, I hope you guys enjoy this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye.